Hi, welcome to Pebble People, and this is our second podcast. We're very excited to be introducing Hannah from Little Nest Sleep, who's with us today to talk to us about all things sleep related to your child and how to manage your routine, how to flexibly manage your routine, and basically how to coach you and your family around better sleep. So here we are. Thanks for joining us today, Hannah.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'd love to get started with just a brief introduction about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started, and what you do.
So my story is not particularly original, I suppose, actually, in the sense that I had a very busy career for over 10 years before having kids, and I had this idea that I was just going to have a baby, it was going to fit into my life, nothing too much would change, and then obviously, spoiler alert, it did. Mm-hmm. Your world gets turned upside down in the best possible way, but it was a huge shock to the system. And obviously, babies don't sleep. And I had a particularly wakeful baby. And I started to read more and more about sleep and became quite obsessed with it, actually.
Yeah.
And I looking back now, I realise I don't think it was just about the sleep. I think it was about trying to regain some sense of control over my life. But two things happened. One, my son just wouldn't follow the rules of all the baby books and the Instagram experts, and he wasn't doing what they said he should, and that made me feel like a total failure. And I became quite kind of isolated and stressed out trying to follow all these rules and routines. And then the second thing that happened is that it didn't feel right to me. So a few years before, I'd done some studying in psychology and child development, and I kept remembering all these things I'd learnt about attachment and how to nurture your baby's emotional development and relationship, and none of this stuff was kind of correlating with all of these rules about sleep that I was reading. And then the pandemic happened, and it was really hard to kind of lose your support system overnight. My son was about eight or 9 months old, but something positive came out of that, and that I could learn to just surrender to actually my own instincts and what I wanted to do. And I sort of found my own way and discovered that I wasn't the only one feeling like that. And there's actually a big community of other parents saying, actually, maybe those kind of old-fashioned baby books and strict rules aren't for everybody, and here's an alternative. So I did some training, did lots of training and studying, and here we are 3 years later, and I work with families all over the world every day, supporting them, helping them find out what works for them, rather than treating babies like kind of robots or following strict routines and rules.
Oh, interesting. So you mentioned there's old advice and sort of more new advice. That is less focused on strict routines. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so I think for a really long time there was this idea that if you kind of put your baby down drowsy but awake, and put them into a dark room, play white noise, and follow these very, very strict timings and routines, that your baby will become a good sleeper. And it kind of comes from quite an old-fashioned idea, I suppose, that the idea that, you can spoil a baby. If you cuddle them too much, they're going to, become reliant on that, become dependent. And there was for a long time, I suppose, throughout the 20th century, this push towards making babies more independent. But obviously what we know now about how children develop, about attachment, about secure attachments, and the importance of responsiveness, we know actually holding your baby to sleep, cuddling them, feeding on demand, nurturing them, meeting all their emotional needs, actually that makes more independent babies over time. That really is what helps them. So that can apply to sleep as well. So if co-sleeping works for you and everyone's getting more rest, you don't need to worry that you're making a rod for your own back. They're not going to be this little and this dependent on you forever. Or if the strict rules and routines actually stress you out and make you feel isolated and lonely and like a failure when your baby doesn't do the 2-hour nap that the book says they're supposed to do, and you're thinking, what am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. Your baby is just a unique, individual. And I think for a long time, a lot of the baby books and advice out there was about treating babies like they were all the same, and it's just a formula, and you do X, Y, Z, they will follow these rules. So a big part of my work is looking at your baby's personality and their temperament, and how much sleep do they need, and what is their, who are they, what is going on for them, for their health, for their development, for their age, and what is normal and what can we work on.
Okay.
So yeah, and having flexibility is obviously a big part of that, because it really impacts the whole family's well-being.
Yeah, of course. So I just wanted to quickly ask about training. You mentioned that you retrained and you did lots of training. So I guess the question for me is, if you did want to become, like yourself, what kind of training would be involved? But also, if you didn't want to train in that field necessarily, but wanted to be like resourceful as a mother, for example, what could you look into? Like, I guess, is there a lightweight version and then sort of the heavyweight version that you're talking about?
Yeah, sleep is a funny industry. It's completely unregulated, so technically anyone could wake up one morning and build themselves a website and say, hi, I'm a sleep consultant, and start going. So
that's good to know.
Yeah, so I think it is important to look at where people have trained or what their backgrounds are. I trained under Lindsay Hookway, who some people will be aware of. She's an expert in infant sleep and feeding, and has a very, very reputable training program. And there are some others as well out there, but the holistic sleep coaching program, which Lindsay runs, is sort of probably the best well-known and established in the UK at least.
Okay.
But if you're not looking to become a professional sleep consultant and you're just looking for more information, then I have a range of guides and a podcast myself with lots of free information, or you can attend one of my webinars or buy a sleep guide where I go through kind of everything you need to know, from how much sleep does your baby need, what is the importance of naps, how can we enhance feeding, how can we enhance all of the elements of the whole 24 hours to help your child sleep better. And I'm really grateful to be part actually of a community of more and more people like me all the time, because certainly when I first started, I felt like there weren't that many people out there saying it's okay to trust your instincts, or it's okay to co-sleep, or it's okay to be responsive to your baby. And now there's some brilliant other sleep consultants out there as well.
Amazing. So I just wanted to touch on something you just said. What is the importance of naps exactly?
Yeah, so so babies nap because they have obviously a lot of brain development going on. We're born, our brains are 25% the size of an adult brain at birth. So we actually have some of the small, if not the smallest and least developed brain at birth of like the whole animal kingdom. So most infants, when they're born in the mammal world, have kind of nearly ready brains and nearly ready bodies, and they can kind of get up and at least walk to their mothers. Obviously our babies are born just completely undeveloped and very, very high needs. So we grow our brains when we sleep. So obviously sleep is important. That's why human babies, when they're first born, sleep up to 17, 18 hours a day. And our sleep pressure also builds really fast because of all of the growth and development going on. So I suppose sleep is a way to kind of regulate a baby's mood, help it support its brain development. So naps are important, but it doesn't matter where they happen or how they happen. You can fit naps in on the go, in a pram, in a sling, in the car, on the way to places. I wouldn't worry too much about how long naps are. There's a lot of pressure to get longer naps. They're no better than a shorter nap. It's really what we want to look at is, how is your baby doing? Are they happy? Are they content? Are they thriving? The answer is probably yes. So, yeah.
Okay. And will a baby sleep if they need to sleep? Will they just sleep anywhere? It sounds like pretty much from what you're saying.
Yes and no. I mean, this is why I talk so much about temperament and personality and looking at your baby as an individual, because in many ways, yes, like people since the dawn of time have been living their lives with their babies on their back, living at, and not worrying about what the wake window was, or how long whether they had a 2-hour nap or a 1-hour nap. So I think we can be reasonably flexible with sleep, but equally some babies, I suppose I describe them as like FOMO kids. They're very alert. They just want to take it all in. They're not just going to drop off anywhere. You might need to be a bit more proactive, thinking about, okay, so I know that you're going to get very stimulated in this situation, so how can I help you get the sleep you need? Because sometimes, especially they get older, they will just keep partying and partying and going and resist the sleep and then become a bit cranky and dysregulated. So it's about thinking about who your baby is. And if you've got a baby that sleeps anywhere and everywhere, embrace that. If they need a bit more work, then figure out how you can kind of have a bit of balance, I think.
So it sounds like you're sort of talking about tailoring your approach depending on your child and their temperament. So how do you assess that in the beginning? Is that something that your the families you work with ask you to do? How would you kind of do it on your own, assess kind of what does my baby need?
Yeah, so there are there's lots of research into temperament and different traits, and so you can Google things and look at the temperamental traits and think, okay, how alert is my baby? How quick to cry are they? Or are they slow to warm? So it's about, I think particularly in the first 6 months of life with your child, your job when it comes to sleep is not to try and get them onto a particular routine, but rather just to try and get to know them and yourself and think about how they respond to different circumstances and environments, and also appreciate that they're always changing as well. That's the other thing about babies, is that what your baby's doing at 3 months is going to be totally different to what they're doing at 8 months. So being ready to be flexible and adapt what's happening, because certainly there might be a stage where they will only nap in the pram, and then a stage where they will not nap in the pram, and it's always evolving. But I think it's about tuning into your knowledge, your own kind of inner knowing as a parent, trying and knowing who your baby is, and trying not too much to compare to others.
Oh, okay, that's a big one.
That's a big one, yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the themes that come up? If you think about the families you work with, we've talked about individuality and babies being individuals and families being individuals, but are there any common themes that have emerged just from your work so far?
Yeah, so I think, gosh, there's so much. I think certainly there are challenges such as early rising. Babies tend to have their body clocks are set often to a bit earlier than us as adults, or difficult bedtimes is a really common one, especially in the toddler stage of kind of establishing boundaries. Parental preference, if you're in a 2-parent family, and often babies and toddlers have very strong preferences for go through phases where they want one parent a lot more than the other. That can be so intense, because one parent feels like they can't help as much, or they want to do things but their baby or toddler won't let them, and the other parent just feels completely touched out and overwhelmed, and it's all on them. That's a really, really common challenge. And then just flexibility and trying to find a rhythm to your day that works, that means your baby is getting the sleep they need, but you're also being able to live your life and get out there and and enjoy yourself. And
I think that's really an important point there around motherhood and sort of, especially the mothers. I think they've gone through the 9 months, and now they have a child, and so they're now dedicated to making the child's or the baby's life the best it can be, but they sometimes ignore their own needs. So what would you say, especially to new mothers, around protecting their mental health as well as their babies?
Well, the best piece of advice I ever got was from one of my oldest friends, and she said, just make sure you get outside every day, even if that is just walking in the rain to your shop, the corner shop, just to buy a pint of milk. Get out there. But if you can do a bit more, even if you are so tired and feeling so lost and isolated and lonely, because it can be really lonely, motherhood, try to make yourself, get out there, strike up a conversation with someone in the park, go to that class that you've been too nervous to go to, because everyone's in the same boat, everyone's in it, everyone's feeling that the same way. So I think finding your community is such an important a puzzle piece in your own mental health.
Okay, that's really important. I think that's where we at Pebble are trying to help, because it's not just about finding the right activity for your child or for your baby. It's also about finding the right activity for you as a mother or a parent, because you have to go with them up until a certain age, so that you also have to be there. And so that's the other question I have is, what happens if you know that a class you really want to go to conflicts with your baby's nap time? Do you still go?
So I would personally say yes, because, you know, babies aren't robots. We don't need to do things at the exact same times every day. And, you know, you can try and live your life by a perfect schedule anyway, and control everything and skip all of the classes and stay at home. And do you know what? You will still have days where your baby skips that nap, wakes up way earlier than you wanted them to, because that's what babies do. So I would say get out there, you know, have some flexibility. Obviously, if you feel like maybe every day is too much for your baby, maybe you need to go every other day, or, you know, maybe there's some balance. If you've got a FOMO baby who's really alert and getting kind of overtired and melting down in a class, then maybe you can have a little bit of flexibility there. Maybe you try and get the nap on the way to the class or on the way home. But I think this period is so short in your life, you know, the days are long, but the years are fast. And I think, you know, getting out there, finding other parents, having that flexibility, your baby will probably surprise you and be more adaptable than you might necessarily think they are. So
Right. Okay.
I would go to the class.
Yeah.
I will. That's what I'll be doing with this next baby anyway.
That's great. And do you have any classes that you would recommend in order to maybe help better sleep? Is there any correlation between the class you could do and maybe your baby, not even just sleep, but to help them develop in a way that, you know, is good for them, you know?
I think, I don't know, I believe that babies sleep well when they are happy and contented, and often that means the mother or the primary caregiver is happier and more fulfilled as well.
Right,
so
right.
I feel like, you know, I don't feel like there's like one. Well, obviously there are some activities, I guess, that are more tiring. So a swim class, or, you know, or something where they can be physically active is never a bad thing for anyone's sleep, because and for our own as well. But I think what fulfills you, what gets you out there and happy, and what they enjoy, is going to ultimately be good for everyone's kind of overall well-being. And sleep is obviously a part of that puzzle piece.
Yeah. Okay. And I think for me, it's interesting. Sort of one of the questions I have generally is, with new mothers versus sort of second time or third time mothers, you know, what are some of the things you might tell a first time or a second time, like in sleep, because they have experience, but they also might compare their babies, right? So I guess that's the trick. Do you have any advice?
Well, yeah, I think with your first, well, I don't think anyone's ever prepared, and I don't think there's really anything anyone can say to prepare you in a way. I feel like everyone just needs to go through it and
experience it.
Expect the unexpected. But I think with the second time or third time round, certainly what people have been telling me anyway is that, and I see this with my clients, is that, you know, every baby really is very different. So if you've had a terrible sleeper first time round, that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to have the same experience. Or if you've had a brilliant sleeper the first time round, sadly that might not be recreated. So I suppose it's just remembering that how different children are, and how different you are as well as a mother. You're going to be, and you know, you're going to be bringing different experiences and expertise to the table. But yeah, and ultimately it goes really fast. So that's not to say it isn't really hard and that you don't need lots and lots of support, because we absolutely do. You know, when you're in it, it feels endless and like this is, you know, but at the same time, I think with your second, there's at least a bit of perspective that you know that this too really will pass, and that wherever you are with your child's sleep right now, you're not going to be stuck there forever.
Okay, that's great. I'm wondering, are there any top tips or things that you can give parents, like a little checklist before we go around, like sleep?
Yeah, sure. Well, for one thing, actually, I was thinking, you know, daylight and getting outside is also, just on a purely biological level, really important for the baby sleep. and the parent sleep. So obviously like vitamin D is important, but there have been really interesting studies that show that actually just babies who are exposed to morning and afternoon sunlight, for example, every day, tend to sleep better at night. So, that's something that, we can do every day, is just by getting ourselves outside and being active and having that sort of, good health. I would also think about, like I say, getting to know your baby, so understanding their cues and trying not to compare to others. So, your best friend's baby might nap for 2 hours every morning, your baby might need 30 minutes. Try not to think, why doesn't my baby do that longer nap? Just think, how are they doing? Are they waking up happy, contented? That's all they need. Don't worry about it. Just find out what works for them. I think that is the best advice I could ever give anyone. And be prepared for things to change constantly. So sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but kind of surrendering and accepting that there are things we can control and there are things we can't. I think that from a mental health perspective can be really, really powerful. Yeah, no, definitely. Hannah, thanks so much for your time today. This was super helpful. I certainly learned a lot, so I'm hoping everybody else will. Thanks again. No worries. Thank you for having me.